All right, everybody get a seat. There's front row is still open. Front row is still open. So thank you all for joining and coming to the March edition of the San Francisco Customer Success Meetup. We've got a really, really fun topic today. When John came up with this idea, we had to kick back the previous topic that we had planned to really squeeze this topic in, because I think it's really, really exciting for me just to see the evolution of customer success over the past few years, to the fact that like you now have companies completely focused on customer success and supporting the customer success teams. But none of this would be possible without Segment, who is our wonderful host, providing the amazing tacos in the back, the food and the drink. So please give a round of applause for them. So before I welcome up Julian, who's going to talk a little bit about what Segment does and how they fit into the customer success community, we do this every single meetup. I want everybody, if you're looking for a job in customer success, please raise your hand. All right, so for people that are hiring, look around. These are the people you need to be talking to. All right, so if you are hiring for a role in customer success, please raise your hand. All right, so if you are looking, look around. These are the people you need to be talking to, all right? All right, so without further ado, let's welcome up Julian from Segment.
Thanks, Janan. Hey everyone, I'm Julian. Welcome to Segment. I've been at Segment for about 5 years. Currently, I lead our West Coast customer success organization, where we have the pleasure to support amazing companies like IBM and Intuit and Instacart, just to name a few companies that start with the letter I. Segment, our mission is to build customer data infrastructure that helps the most inspiring companies in the world to collect, synthesize, and activate first-party customer data across all of their customer touchpoints. Happy to talk about that in more detail after the panel. So Segment is not a customer service SaaS provider, but we are able to dog food the Segment product a little bit within the success team to increase engagement and also reduce churn. Specifically, using our Personas product, we pull in aggregate workspace information and fan that out to our least active accounts to help defend business value, and also pull in behavioral data to drive customized CTAs to help customers reach their magic moment. We're also really excited to have a number of Segment partners here, including Scope AI, and Natalie's going to be on the panel. They just released their Segment integration within the last week or two. So super excited to have them on the platform. So on a personal note, I know like many of you, the customer service stack, if you will, is kind of fraught. At Segment, we've cycled through any number of home-built and off-the-shelf customer service providers, and yet still, we still have way too many Google Sheets, and we still find ways to be confused or surprised when customers are struggling or thriving. So really excited for what our panelists have in store for us today. Final plug, I have a green Post-it on my chest, which means that we're hiring. across multiple success roles in multiple offices. So please come and holler at me if you're interested. So with that, I'll pass it over to John Gleeson from KeepTruckin.
Thanks so much, Julian. All right, let's bring our panelists up here. So, Natalie, you want to come up first? All right, so we have Natalie Abasina. Next up, we have Guy Miriam. And finally, last but not least, we have Edward Chu. All right, so this is a panel that I'm super excited about because I think one of the things that we're so lucky about building customer success teams in the Bay Area is we've got access to some of the best and the brightest startups that are building technology that will change the way that we do business. So we thought it would be really fun to actually highlight some of those companies tonight that are building that next generation of software that all of us are going to be using in 6 months from now. All right, so before we get started though, each of you guys have pretty amazing backgrounds, and before starting companies, you've done a lot with your career. So maybe let's just go down the line and share the backstory. What were you doing before starting your startup? Yeah, let's just move. Yeah, let's go this way.
So right before I started Scope AI, I was actually a UX researcher at Google. So my job was going through user feedback, aggregating conversations, interviews, anywhere that I could grab feedback from, and manually tagging them. So I would literally classify, this is how many people said that they were unhappy with this or that they loved this feature, that this was confusing, that this was exciting. And it was a really manual process. It was really hard for me to get the full picture of how that feedback sat with other teams and using that data to actually communicate with product or anyone else at Google. So I started working on a side project, which basically was, how do I automate this a little bit? How do I make it more efficient? So I started working with a friend of mine who is now my co-founder and the CTO of Scope AI. And we started building a tool to make that search process easier. And after about 2 months, I left Google. And a month later, we got funding from Y Combinator. And that's when we officially incorporated and started the business. That was 2 years ago. January. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, let's pass it down. Guy, tell us about your story before starting your company. That's okay.
So before starting Brightback last year, I was an EIR at Matrix Partners, where I was had a few months to be able to explore different types of business ideas that I was looking into and startup ideas and speaking to a lot of people. The tremendous opportunity and something I will always look back on fondly. Before that, I was at Autopilot, the self-service, easy-to-use marketing automation platform, where I was the COO. And so we were trying to encourage and grow adoption in the marketing automation space by making a tool that was dramatically easier to use and visual and much more affordable through a self-service approach. So that was 3 and a bit years, and we had from pre-launch to 3,000 customers. It was a really exciting ride with an amazing team. Before that, I was at Zendesk, where I was the head of the online, essentially what became the head of growth function over time. So we were both trying to grow revenue. I joined as employee 297, left at 1,400, and we were trying to both grow revenue and conversion through the life cycle, as well as maintaining high levels of customer satisfaction. So, and then before that, I co-founded my first company called CVS Dude, which we were selling collaboration and software development tools, again, in a self-service model based out of Australia, and ultimately were acquired by a company called CollabNet, which was the founder of SVN, the primary version control system that still is used in enterprise today.
It's quite the background. And then last but not least, Edward.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edward, CEO of Catalyst. We're an intuitive customer success platform, but before founding Catalyst, I led and built the CS org for a company called DigitalOcean. For those of you that know about DO, it's one of the fastest growing cloud providers. I joined there very, very early on. I was one of the first non-engineering hires there, and everyone just looked at me like this crazy salesperson, which I was like, I'm customer success. They're like, yeah, you're a salesperson. So anyways, we grew the company from 0 to 100+ million without a sales team. Very impressive growth, 1 million+ customers. And during my time there, my team had built out a CS platform that we used to manage customers because we didn't like what was on the market. And long story short, I showed this tool to a bunch of VPs of CS, and they said, Edward, this tool looks better than what I'm paying $100,000 for. And I said, really? And then after 20 people telling me that, it became a pretty apparent time that say, hey, we should build this for the mass market. So that's where Catalyst came from. And I'm super excited to be here. And thank you, John and Janon, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're jumping ahead in the questions on me a little bit here, because next I want everybody to actually like properly introduce your companies. And maybe as you introduce your companies, introduce like the kind of that one insight that struck you that said, okay, this is something that the world needs. And what is that pain point that you're solving? So got the question? Ready to go? You want to start?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So Scope AI is a platform to improve communication between success teams and other teams such as product or operations. Basically, what we focus on is how do we map what the customers or users are saying to metrics that the entire organization understands. So for product, that's usually the product journey, the touch points that users are reaching out about, and that's, for example, why we're connected with segment data. We're able to look at all of the user touch points and segment feedback based on that. For the rest of the organization, of course, retention, churn are important metrics. So what we help is track all of the feedback that's coming in and turn it into insights that can be actionable for the entire organization. So for me, I think the biggest insight that we've noticed working with different success teams is that relationship between them and the rest of the organization is so dependent on speaking the same language. And usually speaking the same language is being able to prove impact and metrics based on the feedback that's coming in. So when you can tie what users are saying to what their behavior is, that seems to be the most effective way to communicate in a company. Yeah.
So Brightback is a automated customer retention company for high volume subscription businesses. So on the B2B side, our customers include Copper, SparkPost, Drift, Crazy Egg, and we have some B2C customers now like Tableau TV in Canada. The insight, and by the way, I should mention Marie here is our CSM, and we have 15 people now, so excited to have representation. The insight was, if you look at your customer base, we all are familiar with our top accounts and our mid-range accounts, and yet most companies struggle with how to improve retention of the high volume portions of the business, and it typically gets relegated to growth teams or manual processes or marketing type emails. And yet, first of all, that's typically the base from which many of your upsells and your expansions will come from over time. We're growth accounts. Secondly, it's where we can learn a lot about the natural use that customers have of our products and services. And so, and third, it turns out that there's very few things you can do these days where you can have a quick impact. But with the self-service base, I learned in my first companies that if you create really tailored offboarding experiences and wrap up the customer journey properly, about 15 to 30% of customers who are leaving are actually leaving for the wrong reasons. They never onboarded properly to begin with. They never figured it out. They are having temporary misalignment between the pricing and the value they're getting. And if you can identify them at scale, provide a very tailored personal experience, you can retain them. And so Brightback is taking a structured approach. We integrate with the best breed tool stack to measure that and then automatically retain customers. And it's working quite well now for our first batch of customers.
Guess I didn't follow instructions well, so you guys already kind of know what Catalyst does. But I think before leading CS at DigitalOcean, even though I had the title of head of customer success, I was actually the only person on the team before building it out. So I was actually the one up at 3 a.m. when a data center outage happened. So I think the biggest pain point came for me when, as I'm communicating with customers, I'm looking at multiple things to find their data. I'm looking at Salesforce to find their contract information. I'm looking at Zendesk to look at their ticketing data. I'm looking at Mixpanel for their product usage metrics. I'm looking at Intercom for their live chat. Then I'm looking at my own notes, and I'm looking at 5 different places. And when the customer calls me and he says, Edward, like, cannot believe you just had a data center outage. I'm scrambling between screens trying to find info. Oh, what was that last thing I said to you last week? And that's when I knew, like, this is crazy. Like, I have to find so many different data sources just to communicate with one customer. I'm responsible for 1,000. If I have to do this 1,000 times, that's going to be insane. And then as I'm taking notes, the product team reaches out to me and says, hey, Edward, remember that one feature you've been begging me for? The product team is finally going to build it. Now I want you to round up all your notes that you've written and send it over to me. So now I'm taking sticky notes, I'm taking my notebook, I'm taking notes I take from Salesforce, and then I send it to the PM, and the PM's like, Edward, you got to be kidding me. Like, I cannot use any of this. Where is the centralized repository for all of this? So that's where Catalyst comes from, is that we give you the ability to view everything, whether it's Zendesk, whether it's mixed panel data, whether it's product usage metrics, whether it's Salesforce information, everything in under one view, and every note that you take is categorized to your customer. So a PM can log into Catalyst and say, you know what, run my own query, show me all customers that Edward is managing, and every feature request that they've requested, and every note that's tagged to that customer. It makes it very easy. And I think that was what was so cool, is that now it made me and the product team aligned. And I think that's one of the biggest thing about customer success organizations, is that you need to work closely with the product team, because you are the eyes and ears for the product organization as well as the company. So yeah, I'm really excited for Catalyst to be coming into the market. We launched 2 years ago, and now we're rapidly onboarding customers. We're a team of 14 people right now.
All right, so there you have it. 3 amazing companies, 3 amazing ideas, 3 amazing entrepreneurs. Let's shift gears a little bit. What's the hardest thing about starting a company?
I also want to go first.
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we're doing something new. There's not really any competing services right now. So for us, we're getting great results. We're able to automatically save double-digit percentage of customers. We're surfacing new insights to companies. The flip side is there's a lot of people who are involved in the decision to bring Brightback into their organization. And so it's, sometimes we have to speak and win favor from product, from customer support, from customer service, from customer success, from a COO. And so for us, when you're introducing a new workflow into an organization and there's not a replacement, then you need to, it takes time to work through the education process. The flip side is once we have customers on board, they're really liking the service and they're becoming our advocates and starting to bring us in. So I think what's started off as a difficult challenge is probably a good thing, because it means it's hard to do this. And hopefully that's a barrier for us. And when your customers start referring you and start to become your source of new business, that's obviously one of the things we all look for.
I'll go. I think one of the hardest things about starting my own company is that taking feedback from your largest customers. I think we all have been there as a customer success manager or CS leader. Your largest customers usually dictate your roadmap. And I think now that I'm founder and CEO and taking that feedback, it's important to me to say, hey, like, just because you are our largest customer doesn't mean we have to build everything that you're asking us for. And more importantly, we have to help prioritize, like, does this make sense for the rest of our customers? Does this make sense for where our company is going to be 2 years from now? And that's a lot of prioritization and thinking, and the balance of talking with this customer and making them happy and making them say, hey, we're going to build some version of this, but it may not be exactly how you want. And I think that's a lot of times what a customer success person is supposed to do, what a founder is supposed to do, is that you have to convince the customer to trust your vision and trust what you're building, but also be receptive to their feedback. So I would say that's probably been the most challenging thing for us so far.
I would say that there's always very little information. And so a lot of times that means aligning a team around a few data points, but also it has to be very objective. It has to be something that you can communicate. So a lot of times when there are fragmented teams, like someone who's doing sales might also be the UX research team. They're the ones gathering the data to figure out what users want, what should be prioritized. And a lot of times taking that to product, you need objective information. So for us, we try to practice what we preach, we do want to take the user data. We want to show what they're doing, what behavior is associated with it, what metrics it's actually driving. And that alignment is really hard when you're small, early stage, when you're first getting, your first few customers, first few users. And I think it gets better over time. Like the more users you get, the more data you start to collect, it becomes easier to align it. But in the beginning, it can be really tough because it feels like you're driving in the dark for a bit. But I think that's a challenge in every organization, whether you're large or small, getting everyone on the same page. Yeah.
So for the next one, I kind of want to riff a little bit on what Guy was talking about around like the actual sale of the product. I think in recent years, like we've seen the position of customer success rise up in a lot of organizations. You see title like CCO starting, but I think when you lift the hood on a lot of organizations, we know that those teams still have maybe indirect reporting to different parts of the organization, or they don't have their own budget. So when you're selling into a customer success organization, what does that look like? Like, are we seeing budgets grow? Are we seeing a lot of cross-functional organization? Maybe like walk me through that.
Sure, I could start. So definitely cross-functional has been the way that we've sold into companies. So typically we would have an advocate that's on the success team. So the way the product works is we actually integrate with feedback channels. So we'll sit on top of a Drift, we'll sit on top of Zendesk, Service Cloud, whatever channel you're using to communicate with your users. And then after that, we'll start to tie that other data. And a lot of times that data comes from other teams. So it could be product, it could be sitting in sometimes even marketing or sales. So if we're connecting to another CRM database, and that process usually requires everyone it comes from top down, honestly. Like as an organization, if you're saying that you're user driven, if you're saying you're customer centric, that's a priority that management needs to decide they're going to focus on. And that's how you get the buy-in. So if we can go into two very similar looking companies on paper, but if one organization is prioritizing listening to their users and using that to drive higher retention or reduce their churn, then that's the company that's going to make the purchasing decision. But it's definitely cross-functional. I think for success, a lot of times building that relationship is actually important. When we go in and say, this is a tool that can make you more powerful in your organization, you can inform some of the decisions that higher management is thinking about. They have to be able to say, I need more budget. I need budget from product. I need budget from somewhere else to make sure that this can be implemented. So it is growing, but it still seems to be more cross-functional. Yeah.
Two things. I think one is the rise of bottom-up models is something that has really, I've always been part of companies where you're empowering the end user and you're broadly serving horizontal markets with common use cases. And in doing so, users bring the product into the organization and it expands. What we're seeing right now, we are pre-public launch, so we haven't yet had a chance to really see what the inbound flow starts to look like. But what we're recognizing is that we do need to have a passionate user who believes, or a manager who believes that we need to address an overlooked problem within the organization. They have to typically believe that customers are slipping through the cracks who shouldn't be. And actually, we need to have an executive also who is willing to do that, probably at the VP level, who also knows that there's a real opportunity to improve organization retention, and that's usually a VP of CS. Now, I think the VP of CS role is definitely becoming empowered, just like marketing did in sort of the last generation, because there's so many more products today. Like there's 30,000 SaaS companies today. There were 500 10 years ago or less. And so the burden of buying and revenue is much more about full lifetime revenue and for the CS leader. And that means that they're rapidly buying the software, incorporating it. The segment has opened up the opportunity to very quickly plug in different applications and test it. And so my sense is, if you look at 2 years ago versus today, the VP of CS now has budget, can make decisions, and typically has to get some stakeholders on board. Probably 2 years from now, they'll just be completely owning the entire base and just making the decisions hands-on. That's sort of, I feel like that's the trend.
Right.
Yeah, definitely agree with both of you. Like 5 years ago, it was hard to get $500 for a team outing, let alone budget for software. I think that's why we built our own tool, because company was making a lot of money, but CEO wouldn't give me any budget. I don't think he's here. It doesn't matter. He's not my CEO anymore. I'm CEO now. The interesting thing is every board meeting now, the VPs of customer success are required to be in there. The VPs and directors are required to put reports to talk about churn, talk about customer satisfaction, talk about net promoter score. Like, that's probably the first thing your investors are reviewing with the founders is, are our customers healthy? They expect you to sell because you're motivating the sales team with quota, with a great comp plan to actually drive new customers. But that actually doesn't tell you the health of the business. So I think that conversation has now shifted heavily towards churn and retention. And I think that makes CS a first-class citizen, if anything else. And I think from a product team standpoint, like long time ago, product was just built by whatever product people thought. But now the best product teams actually that are really good, they reach out to their customer success org and say, hey, what are you guys hearing from the customers? Can you set up a meeting for me to actually talk with these customers? So now, even when we're selling, I think all three of us, when we're trying to sell into the org, engineers are much more friendly in the integrations that they have to do to help set up to our tools, because they know that if they don't help, they're not going to get that customer feedback, and it's going to make their jobs a lot harder. So I think I'm super excited about the budget's growing, obviously, because that's great for all three of us. But I definitely see customer success being a first-class citizen now.
Right. So actually, I want to build on that a little bit more. So each of you guys are in a unique position in that you get to lift the hoods on all kinds of customer success teams. What are some other like insights or trends that you're seeing? Good, bad, ugly, shocking? What's interesting?
I think one thing that I've seen is that customer success teams are starting to be more data-driven. I think a long time ago, CS was just, hey, how's it going? Or hey, how's your month one going? Now it's, hey, I noticed that you aren't using X, or we have 5 features, but you're only using 3 of them, or you're using all 5, but you're using it wrong. And I think the only way you're able to do that is if you're getting data. So I think that's the first trend that I'm seeing along. The second thing is I think they're being much more targeted in their playbook. Like, how do you actually talk with a customer and engage them to become a healthy customer? You can't just email them and say, hey, how's it going? You actually have a strategy. You have to have use cases. You have to have, how does it tie back to your ideal customer profile that your company is looking at? So all of those things are really important. I think being data-driven and being more targeted is a great thing for everyone in the CS community.
I think something I've noticed, it seems like CS teams are less tolerant of the leaky bucket problem. So when there's an issue, I think historically it was, okay, how do we address this? How do we better educate our users? How do we develop a stronger relationship? I think now this is our responsibility. We are still the touch point to the ultimate user. But if it's a problem that's coming from product, if it's a problem that's coming from operations, from marketing, I think CS teams are less silent about it. Their metrics, what they're being held accountable for, are affected by other teams. So also why they're data-driven, like to convince other teams to take actions that they need them to take. They need to find that information somewhere. They need to be able to present it. So I think it's seeing more processes around that. In communicating with different teams and collecting data to influence those decisions, and making sure that other teams are more involved in resolving problems that they historically were solving themselves.
Yeah, those are both really good points. I think the only thing I would probably add to it is I sort of come across 2 different, we were talking about this before, we've started to recognize that companies either have a cohesive lifecycle centric view of their customer, or you work with a lot of companies where there's a CX org and a PD, like product design engineering org. And depending on whether your customer success team is within the CX org and somewhat divorced from the PD&E side, or whether it's cohesive, I think it tells me a lot about how decisions are made and the way in which they're either a partner with product and engineering or more expected to retain and resolve and service customers. So I feel like many more companies are becoming more cohesive now, and I think that's where the data-driven skill set is so important. Being able to have the relationships internally to access data, maybe have custom dashboards built by the data science and engineering teams, be able to leverage that to surface best practices to customers and to be able to communicate more effectively with executives or product leaders, for example. I definitely think that far more companies are oriented that way now. And I think in that sense, like the CX org is getting the upper hand over the pre-sales org in many companies, especially in the SaaS world today. One more insight I would say is interesting. Some companies have a clear maturity model. If you ask a member of the team, how far up the maturity model is your customer? There's a lot of cases where that's not part of the language of the team. And there's other cases where there's a clear understanding of like the interplay of the level of product integration and implementation coupled with the outcome, which is the value that you're driving for your customer, is an understood sort of matrix. And each CSM is aware of where their customers are on that scale. Companies that have some clarity around that blueprint and how to get them up to the upper right tend to be in companies where I think you see much more sort of broad use by the customers. And it's an interesting way to be able to classify how far, I guess, advances that CSM team.
Right. So I guess given the insight that you guys have into customer success teams, how are you guys going about building your own customer success teams? Is there anything that you're changing in the standard playbook? Actually, maybe even before we get into that, talk about your current customer success team. How far along in building that team out are you?
Customer success is just me and my co-founder right now. We're manning live chat till 3 a.m. where pager duty goes directly to my cell phone. I'm aging very well. It's hidden because I'm using my wife's Korean facial products, but it's stressful. And I think as a founder, if you're not actually doing the hard work and you're not learning how to be CS first, you can't possibly hire CS folks. So it is stressful, it is painful, but good thing we're raising around soon, and I'm going to hire a bunch of people to handle live chat. And but I think the biggest thing is if the founders don't know how hard CS work is, they should. And if you are a CS leader and your CEO is telling you how to run CS, then you should tell he or she to manage live chat or handle a ticket or handle an email one time, so they actually understand. I think they'll really appreciate the fact that it isn't easy, and they'll learn a lot of problems through that process also. So yeah.
So we started as a CS first company. So hired Marie before anybody else on the customer facing side, and has almost retained has been the only customer facing person for most of the company so far. In looking for people that I hire in the customer success org, I look for empathetic curiosity with customers first and foremost. Secondly, an owner mindset, meaning willing to get initiatives off the ground, see them all the way through, and have a high degree of willingness to respond and be versatile as needed. I third will look for somebody with high EQ, and this is something we talked back and forth on recently, but someone who can read the room and respond to the needs of a given customer. And then fourth, I look for somebody who's data-driven, actually, because that's a critical part of today's world. So wanted to instill those skills. The third thing we've done that's really been really valuable for us is we set up shared Slack channels with all of our customers so far, and we haven't even gone to Zendesk yet. We have a Zendesk Help Center set up for documentation, but all of our interaction is through live chat, as you described, and we're intimate with all of our customers. We are aware of their weekend schedules, their night schedules. We're learning from them. We're sharing insights. That sounds a little wrong, but but the point is that it's really been a partnership. We view all of our early customers as partners. We've learned a tremendous amount, and we actually pushed out our public launch in order to have the time to really be able to learn with them. And as you said, it's hard work, but it's the most valuable thing you can possibly do at this stage.
We actually do shared Slack channel also, and just recently found out that our own created emojis they can pull up too. So if you didn't know that, I highly recommend you delete all of them soon. They found one, and it was of me that somebody made.
So no HR in your company either?
Well, I'm HR, so.
Yeah, so for our team, actually our entire product team is on CS. So we have a really tight feedback loop between any interaction with the user and how this should be influencing the product. We see it as CS, if they're, if everyone is seeing the same information, we should be coming to the same conclusions, and that works both ways. So if product is saying this isn't something that we can prioritize, that should be something that anyone who's talking to a user can understand. And so we really focus on just creating really good processes around communicating that. So although product is actually on the CS team, like they also talk with, everyone has like a group of customers that they're basically like account managers. That's like the relationship. And it's very close. Like we know a lot about them. We know their personalities, their families, where they're going on vacation, the full. But it's great because it does give us the context too of why, you know, sometimes if I think the 360 view of the user is really important. So having product on that team and having them track information has been really great to making decisions that the entire company aligns on. So a lot of times if whether it's me or someone on the sales team or product has an interaction with the customer, we track in or in scope, we'll save a specific insight as this is what came up in our conversation. This is how many other people have actually mentioned this. We search across all the conversations, and these are the metrics that are important, and that's why these are actionable and something that we need to prioritize or take a look at potentially, you know, move forward on our roadmap. So every meeting that we have one once a month about this. Everyone is on the same page. There's very little disagreements around why something shouldn't be done or why something should be prioritized, which has been really great. Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. So kind of building on that again, oftentimes, you know, people will come out to this meetup and they'll say, you know, how do I get a job in customer success? And I reflect back on my own career, which was, you know, joining an early stage company as the first hire and building out customer success for the first time. And I think it's just a wonderful way to get like a really good 360 on, A, how companies are built, but then B, how to really do customer success. Because like Edward said, you really have to roll up your sleeves in the early days. So if there's people in the room who are thinking, hey, I want to take the plunge. I want to, you know, maybe be the first CS hire at a startup. What advice do you have them before jumping in to that?
I would say just be really excited about a challenge. You'll be wearing a lot of hats. You'll be, you know, there is no playbook. That's basically and you have to be excited about that. I think that picking a team that you feel like you have a really good, because a lot of the jobs that you'll be doing, you need a team that understands how difficult it is to be the first CS hire. And so I think making sure that everyone understands that this job is, it's tasking, it can be really demanding. There's a lot, like I said, very little information that can be qualitative. So you need a lot of trust. You need a team that understands that what you're seeing is really valid. And it's great when you find data to back that up, but you also need that as like when you're looking for a team to join that's really small. Yeah, but I would say the biggest thing is like, there's no roadmap. You're coming in, you're gonna have to, you know, get on the ground and figure out what's gonna work with specific teams, and it's gonna be different for every startup. So, yeah.
I would say, agree with those. I would say, you know, I have a quote on my LinkedIn profile: people who are lucky grind it out, and people who grind it out get lucky. And I think there's some truth to that, which is you obviously want to join a company that you have some intuition and some passion in that space, but a lot of it is just going to be perspiration and grinding it out. So I think one is being willing to put those hours in and do what it takes. Two is being a dependable force in the team, because really you become the fulcrum point between product and the customer, and you increasingly provide bi-directional transparency. And if you can do so in such a way where by asking the right questions of each person and then being the eyes and the ears, and then secondly, your also role is to keep the momentum and the drumbeat going on all, you know, the follow through is completed. Once people no longer question whether or not you're going to follow through on what you say, then you become a rock for the organization. So I think people who want to be a rock, who are attracted to that opportunity, I think are going to be particularly successful in startups. I could list a few others, but I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, please. All right, I could go. I think customer success, being the first customer success person in any company is probably the most exciting thing ever. Like, you're basically doing the CEO's job now. And I think that's a big responsibility. You have to know the product really well. You have to engage with the customers. You have to be empathetic. You have to sometimes teach the customer on what they should do. But I think one of the trends that we talked about trends earlier, one of the biggest things that we've seen is a lot of customer success people move into product. Actually, one of my best customer success managers that I hired at DigitalOcean, he's now a product manager because he knew about the product better than anyone on the product team, because he knew what the customers wanted, what the customers hated about it, versus PMs that just come in. They've never spoken with a customer in their entire life. So I would say my one advice would be find a product that you are super excited about, because I think excitement goes a long way. Because I think like you guys have said, it's very taxing. It's a very exhausting job to be the first CS person. So if you're excited about the product, like all of that will go away. It'll make the customer conversations much easier. It'll make your conversation with the engineering team that much easier. So I think I'm lucky to have been a part of a bunch of companies, and every product that I joined, like I love those products.
Right on. So let's wrap things up here. Who wants to answer the next question? I'm not gonna give away the question until somebody puts up their hand. All right, Guy. So this is the last interview question in all the interviews that I do when I'm hiring. What's one question I should have asked today that you were just dying to tell the audience the answer to?
Maybe what's one thing you can do to be really successful in your job tomorrow?
All right, what's one thing you can do to be really successful in your job tomorrow?
Why, thank you. I would say, so gearing it towards customer success specifically versus starting a company and so on. I think it's really important when working with customers to understand what is the OKR or the business initiative specifically that the current project or service is directly impacting. What gets to the board conversation, or what gets to the CEO's considerations or the company's KPIs, and be able to relate that, so that if the CEO or your VP comes and asks, why are we working with this company and how is it going? To start that with, we are working with this company right now because they're about to launch a product in 2 months. And if we don't do X, Y, and Z, there's going to be a significant impact. And if we do, then by the end of the year, the results are Y. It's a completely different way to start every conversation. So I think if you think about all of your customers, if you know what's the OKR business initiative that we're driving directly, you're in a much stronger point of leverage in every aspect of the conversation in terms of keeping them on track, keeping ourselves on track, et cetera. And actually having the sway to make asks internally.
Awesome. All right. So the hard questions are just about to start. So turn it over to you guys. The easy ones are done. Do you want to start us off? Let's do it. All right, Tom.
I was still thinking about it.
They don't have to answer that question.
You raised your hand. You voted.
Yeah, you got it. So, Guy, just to carry on with that, and the question is actually to everyone. So you tend to sell into or provide value to a lot of different organizations. You all talked about that. So how do you do that? How do you look at the metrics different orgs are measured to and what they're responsible for, and how you pull that all together to prove enough value that you can get a renewal or an upsell?
Yep. I mean, specifically in our case right now, and in general, I suppose, it's understanding what are the needle movers for an organization. What we look for is a company churning above or below 3% per month. We look at, do they have a online cancellation process? And we look for, do they have a leader, a forward-thinking leader who has a bee in their bonnet, that they, either the customer journey experience is not at par and uniform across the org, or that they are losing customers they know they couldn't be. So we're kind of looking for that profile right off the bat. And yeah, that's my answer.
So we've actually found when you're looking at different teams, the metrics that actually matter or are effective, everyone is aligned on usually. So I'll give an example. If you're on the customer success side and the only thing you have access to is how, the conversations, retention, churn, And product obviously is also looking at churn, but they also have a lot of other data around engagement, anything that they basically have set up. So if customer success goes to product and says, we think this should be prioritized because X number of customers have reached out about it, and you're more focused on the metrics that matter to your team, you'll find the ones that if you talk about churn, suddenly their ears perk up. Well, if you just talk about the metrics that are important for your team, it could go either way. Like it just varies. It depends on who you're talking to, your relationship with them. So what we found is it's actually pretty straightforward. Like when we have these conversations, we want to hear what's worked in the past and what hasn't worked. So if they've gone in and said, this is the volume of conversations, this is what they're saying, no one does anything, that's not enough. There has to be something else that product understands to continue that conversation. So a lot of it is in the discovery, I think, when you're doing the sale. It's just really get people in earlier. So if you can get someone from the product team in the conversation within the first, we had a call, you're interested in the product, let's get product in too. And then having that also, it's being a mediator in a way helps. So I would say find the overlapping metrics.
Yeah, along with everything you guys said, I think 99% of the time we try to get all stakeholders on that very first call. And you do that by finding the champion first. There's always going to be that one champion. And on that initial call, before that call, you're making a champion feel like, man, I have a serious problem. And the more urgent they feel, the more likely they're going to get the resources to rally the rest of the org. So I think we try to do that on every, whether it's sells or upsells, and it's worked pretty well.
Who is your champion out of interest?
For our product?
Yes.
Usually the VP of customer success. Yeah.
All right, who's next? All right, we got 2, rock, paper, scissors. Ready? Oh, wow. All right, here we go.
Hi there, I am Lily from a company called SnapDocs, and we're, as a customer success team, trying to understand kind of key questions of when is really the right time to be investing in technology? What are those key considerations when you want to get out of G Drive, when you're still a young company? When is that kind of critical point? Any key considerations or guidance you have around that would be helpful.
I think that's a great question. We talk with so many teams, and they're organizing notes on Google Docs. They're still doing things on spreadsheet. They're updating each field after each call. I think at that point, it really talks about, is it honestly hindering your process? Like, are you spending more time managing different flows than you actually are serving the customer? Because if that's the case, then you need some kind of tooling already. It's the level of depth of tooling. Like, do you need 1 tool or 3 tools? But if you are putting customer information inside of a spreadsheet, you probably need to go to a CRM right away. If you can't afford Salesforce, there's other free CRMs that you should move to, because those things are just quick wins that you can automate rather than updating a spreadsheet and centralized repository. So then it's product usage. If you're looking at an internal tool and it's very difficult, you need lots of engineering time and resources, that's a good win already to convince the company, say, hey, we have 5 engineers that are constantly working on this internal tool just to get us data on how our customers are using our product. We should probably invest in that tool, because 5 engineers times, I know engineers are expensive, $200K, that's $1 million. You can get a tool for way less than that. So that's usually a good selling point to any CFO.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said to do things manually first and figure out what's working and what's not and deeply understand it. I think to your point, tools are so cheap these days, and between getting Salesforce and Catalyst and Segment, which allows you to plug into many different applications, and Zapier is the same as well. I'm a fan. Like at Brightback, we have pretty much put in a stack from the very beginning. Actually, we don't use it as much as we will later on, but we've been able to build the skills and the muscle to know that as we grow and scale, we're not going to have to go through a dramatic shift and change in how we work. We have all of our customers in Salesforce, and we learn from them. We use Slack, we document in Guru, and so on. So I believe that putting in tools early, there's also the benefits of being part of a vendor community where you learn, and there's knowledge sharing communities and so on that I think is really valuable.
I just want to reiterate the question because we're recording here and might help. All right. So I want to clarify the question. So the question was, when do you move to like a centralized customer success specific tool versus the many different tools like Salesforce and Slack? When do you consolidate in one place?
Yeah, so I think now that I understand your question better, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve, so or what you're prioritizing even. So if you're finding, across these different tools, you're spending your time, like 70% of your time is spent in one specific function, and there's a tool out there that solves that problem, then that would be the time to start moving into that one tool, I think. So I'll give you an example from the product perspective. So if your team, and this usually happens if your customer success team is working with a lot of clients. So once you hit this point where you're getting a lot of data points on product, you're probably going to spend, if you're investing in a process in your company to communicate those insights, the manual starts to become a significant time sink. So if you're spending 30-40% of your time trying to track this user feedback and translating it and putting it in Google Docs, then that's time to move into. So I mean, for us, we've definitely have different groups of companies. There's smaller companies that just want a process. Like from day zero, they're startup, they're got five people on their team, but they want to invest in this process to start using our product. Then there's other companies that are getting 500 tickets a day, 1,000 tickets, 10,000 tickets, and for them, there's a point where the qualitative isn't working anymore, and they're spending a lot of time, wasting time, kind of trying to understand that data, and that's when they'll move into specifically a platform for that. But it depends on what your breakdown of responsibilities are, I would say.
And actually, one thing I'm going to add to even that, I think like when you select that tool, and Guy, you kind of touched on this as well, there's a lot of like domain expertise that you can download like onto your own brain by selecting the right vendor. Like I think if you were to work with any three of these guys, they're going to be truly invested in your success because your success is their success. So I know early on in my career, when Gainsight was just getting started, I purchased Gainsight, and I got firsthand access to their founding team, and the mentorship for me has been like invaluable for the rest of my career. So I think like not only like getting everything in one place, but if you find that next generation solution who really cares in you, you can really move your career and your team forward pretty quickly. That's like maybe like one of the hidden benefits.
And sorry, I misunderstood your question earlier. So I think the fact that you're using Slack, you're using Atlassian, and you're using Salesforce means you have budget. Like those things are expensive. Like you had budget to get those tools, which for us is usually a good sign that you're ready because you're already organizing data in various sources. To give you an example, like one of the customers that we work with, while they're using Catalyst, before using Catalyst, they would take a note inside Salesforce for a meeting. Then they would take a note on Evernote. Then they would go back to Salesforce to update because the field says, oh, this customer is no longer an upsell and opportunity. Then they would go into Jira to create a ticket. But now in Catalyst, they would just say, save note, change field, update to Jira, all in one action. So I think for the benefit of having that tool is like, when do you feel like doing 3 different tools, actually remembering? Like that's the hardest part is you're on a call, your customer's screaming at you, and you're typing frantically on these notes, and you have to remember after the call to go change the upsell field opportunity to no. Like 99% of the time you're going to forget because some other ticket came in. So I think when the team is ready to actually streamline that data and want to view a whole data set in one view, that's usually a good sign. And budget obviously is important, but it sounds like you have it. Or have a little bit of it.
I think generally there'll be a lot of use cases. You said 30 to 40%. I've noticed a few of our customers have mentioned if you're seeing 30% of your time or more is going into a repetitive effort, kind of like you're describing, where you're having to find data between, find notes between Salesforce and a Google Doc and Evernote, or if 30% of your tickets, for example, are in response to a common use case or a need, then that's a time when typically some sort of consolidation or integration is going to, like an investment is going to, you can usually drive that to like 10%, for example, in which case 20% opens up for onboarding, engagement, training, like sort of high value activities.
The best way to describe it to executives also is if you're responsible for 50 customers, but you're spending hours upon hours just on one customer because you're researching that customer, going to different tools, and that means the other 49 are suffering tremendously. So I think that's tremendous ROI for the executive team to look at, like, is it worthwhile for me to manage 5, 6 tools when I can take 2 minutes and look at one tool and update everything in one tool, and product team can log in and see where all the feedback is. So I think for a lot of the customers that we talk to, that's usually a great selling point, both internally and to the rest of the team.
All right, and time for, are we time? We're done. All right. Well, guys, let's give a big round of applause. That was an amazing panel. All right, well, everybody have a great evening, get home safe, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So can I just?
All right.